Look at that. We're all here like magic.
It's like Harry himself did it.
There you go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody that's joining us on day 2 of TMF week. Welcome to session 2 on day 2. We have an incredibly fun, I'm told it's fun. We'll see if it is. You'll be the judge. Panel on TMF culture. The title of the panel is called The Goblet of Files, Mastering the Magic of TMF Culture. We have moderated by Anusha Rameshbabu from Moderna, David Ives from Novartis, Ann Ackley-Fifer from Daelight, and Teryn Maihiot from Bristol Myers Squibb. I'm going to hand it over to Anusha to kick off today's panel discussion. Just as a reminder, there is a chat panel that you can interact directly with the panelists, as well as a Q&A area if you want to ask questions directly. We can field questions throughout as well as at the end. And with that, I will pass it over to you, Anusha.
All right, thank you so much. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I hope you are ready to take on this very magical journey with us. So my name's Anusha. I am an ETMF manager at Moderna, and I received my Hogwarts letter, which is my years of experience, about 6 years ago. So I have 6 years of direct TMF experience. I started, and I never left because I loved it so much. And today I am here hosting this panel called the Goblet of Files with 3 amazing panelists. As you can see, we're doing a Harry Potter themed panel. So I represent the House Hufflepuff. Later on, we'll describe what that means. And I'm going to go in the order in which I see on my screen here. So up next, we have Ann.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ann Ackley-Fifer, and I am TMF Services Delivery Lead at Daelight Solutions. Received my Hogwarts letter 18 years ago. I can't believe it myself. I am representing House Ravenclaw.
And then we have David.
Hello, everybody. My name is David Ives. I am the head of CDM process at Novartis. And I received my Hogwarts letter, same as Anne. We were talking just before this, many years ago. You can't really tell, but this is a dark maroon color because I am representing Gryffindor, and I do have my Marauders map here just in case we get lost along the way. But yeah, really excited to be part of the panel.
And Teryn.
And my name is Teryn Maihiot. I am the Senior Manager of Clinical Documentation at Heritage Karuna Therapeutics, now a company of Bristol Myers Squibb. I received my letter to Hogwarts 8 years ago, so I'm excited to be here today as part of this lovely panel.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much. One of the things that when we came to start thinking about this panel was I brought together the crazy idea of Harry Potter and TMF, because just like in Harry Potter, we see a lot of magical, sometimes crazy things, and we deal with, fantastic beasts. Sometimes we all have to attend potions class to figure out, how to put things together. And sometimes we also have to defend ourselves against the dark arts, which could be some of our very favorite cultural pitfalls or perhaps inspection findings that we want to avoid. So how does that all tie together to TMF culture, Anusha, you might ask? So that's exactly what we're here to explore today. We're going to start off actually with a sorting hat ceremony, which is the best way to describe this is to say, we all find different personalities within our own team and also within the teams that we work with. So using the houses from Harry Potter and their characteristics, the panelists here today, which is us, we're going to explain to you the different types of personalities and people you may encounter. And carrying that theme of personality, we also will talk about the different ways in which you'll interact, certain challenges you might face, some of the positives of working with these and how that all comes together when it comes to preparing our TMFs and making sure they're staying inspection ready, but also how to grow a positive TMF culture within your organization and exactly what you'll need for that. So I'm going to start off with the sorting hat ceremony. And just like we do in Harry Potter, apparently Gryffindor always goes first because that's the order in which they explain the houses. So I will let David go a little bit more into, David, why don't you tell us about, what it's like being a Gryffindor in the TMF world, but also what it might be like for functional leads that you perhaps know to be Gryffindors.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So when we think about Gryffindor, I think these people are your change champions by nature, right? They want to be collaborative. They want to be part of what's going on. And they will be supportive of their colleagues across the study team. I also find that Gryffindors are full of optimism, which can be huge in the face of very common TMF challenges. And if I had to choose, I would say I want these people as part of my inspection team, 100%. So I think that for me kind of embodies what you'd expect from, whether it's within the functions or on the TMF team, the Gryffindor personality trait.
Absolutely. And since we're going in the order of houses, I will take on next as Hufflepuff. So these are your mega hardworking, loyal team members that really love to be part of the team. They're all about bringing people together. They love to see different characteristics of, they're very genuine, they're well-rounded. So they want to bring everybody together. So these are your people that you want doing your trainings. So when it comes to TMF training or, inspection training or really any kind of sort of educational leadership front, these are the people that you want in the room where they're really trying to gauge that functional, accountability from everybody. They love bringing people together and they have that personality to bring people together. So when you're putting together a team, whether it's for your TMF team or whether you're trying to gauge champions from your organization, these are the people that you want because they're kind of like a glue that bring different personalities together. And they love doing that. And they bring out a very positive sunshine, yellow side to it. So that's what a Hufflepuff is. And that's the type of personality you want on your team. And I think next we'll have Ravenclaw.
So House Ravenclaw, these people are independent and driven by concrete, measurable results. So nothing is going to convince us to anyone's talking point more than solid, well-defined metrics with proper contextual underpinning. We tend to be precise to the point of inflexibility, nitpicking minutiae versus looking at the big picture. That can frustrate other houses, but our research skills are top of the line.
Absolutely. And then we've got Slytherin.
So maybe the most judged house based on their characteristics. Whilst Slytherin has a tough exterior, sometimes inside they are very prone to others' opinions of them, such as we are in the TMF world, where we want to have a tough exterior and we want our TMF to be perfect, but sometimes on the inside it's not. So it's owning those faults and understanding that whilst we're misunderstood, we are still of great value. Whilst they may not be the greatest of team members, they can be very, very helpful when it comes to tasks that are analytically backed. Such as the Ravenclaw, they are driven by metrics. However, less team effort, I believe, would be involved with the Slytherins. But yeah, just as driven by those metrics that we all know and love. So,
thank you. So as you guys can see, every house has different qualities that they bring to the table, right? So you can't have a team made up of just one type of personality. When you have this type of working world where you need these different personality traits, that's why all these houses or all these kinds of people need to come together to get the common goals accomplished when it comes to TMF compliance and even building out like a proper TMF culture so that you have the appropriate engagement. Now, oftentimes we're quick to reject certain negative traits of these houses, right? So what are those kinds of traits that we think about when, you know, what we're calling defense against the dark arts is how to protect yourself or how to protect your organization against those common pitfalls. So each of these houses or each of these personalities, they do have their downsides as well, right? So there might be, we all explain the positives now and what kind of characteristics they are, but there are some negatives that we also will dive into now. So, you know, what are those common cultural pitfalls you anticipate when it comes to having these personalities? So speaking from your personality's perspective, if you're on a team and you're Gryffindor, let's say, what is something that could easily go wrong for you as a Gryffindor, and then maybe also share a little bit about how you would combat that. So we will actually start this time in a different order. So I'll actually start with the Ravenclaw this time.
Okay, so because we're research driven, we may not ask for help. We're going to rely on our research skills to solve issues. And honestly, it's going to take a Hufflepuff to step in and occasionally remind us that there's others there willing to help. We want to take on everything ourselves because we know we can do it to fastidious perfection. We don't want to let go of that control to others. So this need for total control can lead to burnout, and it does not allow for other team members to learn from their mistakes, you know, by giving them the chance to do things. So that's what I have to say about that.
All right, thank you. Teryn, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so when thinking about this from a Slytherin perspective, I really try to highlight some of the negative things of the TMF world that we sometimes hyper-focus on. And for me, one of those is oftentimes our metrics. Our KPIs, our, you know, completeness percentages, the timeliness to upload. As a Slytherin and as that personality type, well, as I've learned from this panel, I am much more of a Slytherin than I actually thought I was. So a little personal growth in this project as well. But I'm realizing that relying solely on the systems that we're relying on may not be the number one resource to gauge our completeness, because if your system's not 100% accurate or isn't 100% up to your study milestones or where you are in your current study conduct, you know, things are going to be off, percentages aren't going to line up. And at the end of the day, as a Slytherin, that would be very, very, very frustrating. And having to then break out of the Slytherin comfort zone and ask for help probably would not happen. And then I would get overwhelmed and get frustrated, and it would just end up negative. And so realizing that while we may rely on the metrics as a tool, I don't think we should rely on them as heavily as sometimes they are made to be, or at least as they're advertised to us. Regardless of what platform you use, they're advertised heavily, and I think sometimes we lean on them a little bit too much. Recently in an inspection, we had gone through something where we had relied on our metrics for a certain classification, and turns out that those metrics were wrong, and we had to scramble in an inspection to find the monitoring documentation that we were missing based on those milestones being wrong. So it's just learning those pitfalls of the systems that we use on a day-to-day basis, but also realizing that it's okay to ask for help. And while a Slytherin probably wouldn't on a normal day, Teryn would. So yeah.
And it's important for us to also recognize that, right? We all may, you know, wear our house colors and represent different personalities, but we also borrow from those traits. So there are certain situations where maybe I like to be, even as a Hufflepuff, I love teamwork, but sometimes I love to work independently. You know, that might just be, you know, I sort of stay in my lane and I know what I'm doing. But then I need somebody to also bring out, maybe my personality is being very nice, loyal, in that way. But I may need a Slytherin's help every now and then to be a little bit more strict in some ways, right? So we all need somebody who's a Slytherin on our team, because maybe they don't speak as much during when everything's going on, or maybe they do. We have different kinds of Slytherins, right? But they could be sort of like a hero behind the scenes, and we may never find out, right? Just like Snape. We didn't know until the very end that he was always, in favor of Harry, but that's something, they're sort of like those silent heroes where we need them to keep us accountable. And we obviously, I'm seeing the chat. I love all these gifts that are coming in from Harry Potter. They're great.
I'm like giggling. I'm trying not to get
I'm trying to keep composure, but they're hilarious. I love the gifts. So thank you guys for sharing those in. But just like that, we need people to keep us accountable and to keep us on track. I'm going to actually, David, if you could tell us a little bit about some common pitfalls of being a Gryffindor. And I only say this way because Gryffindors are often seen as like, brave leaders in the forefront, but they may not talk about their, necessarily some of their weaknesses or their pitfalls, and what are some things that perhaps make them, not like things the way they're going as much. So tell us a little bit about that side of Gryffindors.
Yeah, I think one pitfall arises when expectations aren't clear, right? You think about this culture across your TMF, or even team dynamics, company dynamics. I mean, you need to have clear expectations. So I think, Gryffindor might be really like positive, take the initiative, but that might actually hurt the team, right? So if for example, if somebody goes and runs off, takes initiative and starts doing a QC without understanding what the process actually is, that's going to cause a waste of time on their part, on the team's part. You might kick up issues that are already known about or already being dealt with. So it's great when people take initiative, but it is something that, if expectations aren't clear, time and energy gets wasted and can negatively affect the culture of the whole team, right? So if something needs reworking or produces issues that aren't really necessary. So I think when you think about, Anusha, you were talking about, well, how do you work through those pitfalls and issues? I think it's upon us as TMF leaders in our organizations to be crystal clear about what the expectation, the roles and responsibilities for the TMF are. So I'll just give you one example. Let's say you finalize your TMF plan. Take 10 minutes at a study team meeting to go through it. Just say, like, high level, here's the key dates, who's responsible, roles, and key processes. And that can go a long way, because people sort of at least have some ground level understanding. So, if they don't know what success means, they're never going to be successful, right? So I think it's
absolutely.
I mentioned this in the next section, so I won't delve too deep into it, but I'll save it because I know we're going into the Fantastic Beasts section, but David brought up functional areas, and this is like my itch. So yeah.
And just one thing that I would say about sort of from a Hufflepuff's perspective is sometimes a common pitfall is you might find people that are very quiet about the struggles they're going through, and Hufflepuffs are most likely one of those people where they don't speak up as much. So you may have people on your functional teams or even on your TMF team that are having a harder time approaching to ask questions, although they may come off as friendly and having a friendly personality. When it comes to having challenges, they may not necessarily feel ready to approach and ask those tough questions. So that can be something as small as, how do I navigate the system and try to file my documents? Or that could be something even larger where they're having genuine issues related to, it could be a ClinOps functional team member that's maybe getting, sent documents into their inbox to make them go file when it really should be your functional areas that are doing the filing, right? So you may have people like that perhaps need a little bit of the other, like the support from the other houses. Like I said, there are strengths and weaknesses in each house, right? So while they may bring people together, they may also feel sort of alone in their struggles and not really feel comfortable to approach. So that's when, it's something that they may recognize on their own, but also they need to come out of their comfort zone a little bit to go and ask for that support, so that it's teamwork. And that's something that everybody needs to remember when it comes to the TMF. It's not one person filing every single document to get to where we need to be. It's really a combined effort from everybody to make sure that we're getting our studies to where they need to be. And, most important of all, getting these products out to the patients that are waiting for that magic to happen in their lives too. So, speaking of what David mentioned and what Teryn mentioned, the functional areas, our next sort of segue section is into fantastic beasts and where to find them. So what this is sort of like the part where we start talking about those hidden gems in your organization. So each of us works with different functional areas. What are some characteristics that we like to go out and look out for? And we'll base these off of the houses again, but also, it can be very generic as well. What are some things that you're looking for, to identify those TMF superstars? So I know, Teryn, you had some stuff to share about this one. So we'll start with you first.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, to David's point, you need to attend those study team meetings and inform your functional areas. No matter who's on the call, you don't know what person is going to be on the call every week. It may be the same functional member. It may be different functional team members, depending on how large your organization is, but highlighting the importance of their zones. So I have literally been struggling with this since I got where I am, and it's something I deal with every day. But I think the key is you need to take the time aside. So what I ended up doing is attending study team meetings, and I defined one zone to go through every week. So I would, the first week I started with the regulatory zone because it was the first non-clinical facing zone that I approached in the index. And I just went down the line, and you would be completely baffled at the folks who have years and years and years of experience who have no idea that their documentation ends up somewhere at the end of a study. I've had vice presidents. I've had senior directors, executive directors, people who I would have assumed, which I think is the number thing that Slytherins do, is assume people know things, and they don't. And so highlighting all of those functions and where their documentation goes for safety, the fact that we want those case books, we want the SAE reports, we want the stuff that they're collecting as part of their investigation. They were like, oh, people care about this stuff? It's like, yes, we do. And there is a very lovely group of people called TMFers who love this stuff. And so my second thing, which also also falls into the Slytherin personality, is don't let these people forget you. So after I finished going through the index, I still followed up. I still attended those study team meetings, and I ended up re-highlighting a different section. So I would circulate through them, and I would say, okay, safety, we've got XYZ amount of documents. Here's what we have. Is it what we should be expecting? Statistics, same thing. Regulatory, they're a little bit harder because they like to keep their documents close to themselves, but we're working on it. And so having those difficult conversations, approaching things that you may shy away from, that you might not want to, I don't know, some people want to avoid conflict in a way, and sometimes I think asking people to do something above and beyond what they're already doing sometimes can come off as conflicting. And it's really not, because at the end of the day, it's a team effort, and it's highlighting the fact that this isn't just a clinical issue. I think for a long, long time, the TMF has been put into one bucket that it's clinical's problem, and it's not a clinical problem. It's an entire study team, cross-functionally issue. and that those documents are of high importance. And sometimes it takes, I had requested that a mock audit be conducted, and you would be shocked at the amount of awareness that was brought by that mock audit, and just raising it to that level. And as a Slytherin personality, I feel like that's definitely something they would do. And it's like, okay, if the study team is going to say they know everything, well, then let's test it. And so I did, and it didn't go very well, but we were able to grow from it and learn from it before the real one happened. And we were successful. We had a successful real inspection. We just completed it back in March. Happy to say that I was a part of it. But this was a huge, huge issue, and always will be. And every lessons learned I've taken, I will take with me for the future. So that's just my soapbox about functional areas. But I could go on and on. But from a Slytherin perspective, or from an anti-Slytherin perspective, I'll let somebody else talk.
And no, it was great to hear that, because you hit on some of our, a couple of our key takeaways here, which is, that effective communication piece, making sure everybody's on the same page and trained well on what they're expected to do, but also accountability in culture, right? Like, it's very hard. It's very easy for us to train and say everybody needs to do these things and that's it. But then how do we go back and test that? These are the inspections and the audits, which is sort of like our practice tests, and our OWLs, our ordinary wizarding levels. They're called OWLs. Those are exams in the Harry Potter world. So those are the chances that we get where, we get to learn about, whether our processes are effectively working or not, and it's a very, like you said, a very Slytherin thing to do, testing in that way, where you say, okay, you say, you know your stuff, let's test it, let's test and see whether you actually know what's going on. So taking that same question of, fantastic beasts of, uncovering hidden gems within your organization, we'll move to Gryffindor. So when you're a Gryffindor, David, what are you looking for in those, functional areas and, those key pieces that you're trying to gather to build that SME in your organization?
Yeah, so I'd get my invisibility cloak and sneak into their house to talk to them.
Very Gryffindor thing to do, yes.
So no, but really, and I think this sounds simple, but it's really, it's important. Is you need to meet people where they are, right? Like, you can't. People in biostats are living a very different life than we are, right? Like, it's very important, but they're not. I think that having, and Teryn is kind of talking about having some expectation that people even understand the TMF, or sometimes even know what it means, is a big assumption. So I think it's important to meet people where they are, and part of that, to me, and this may sound a bit odd as well, but it's one way to ferret out the superstars is to listen to the people who complain the most, right? So, like, and I mean that from sort of, I guess, two elements. One is they often complain to everybody else. And if you leave that unaddressed, you're going to hurt the culture, right? People start thinking, oh, this isn't value add. I hate this TMF. Why do I have to do this? But the other thing is like, I think if you can engage them and give them a sort of a why, it can turn them into an advocate, and you hope that they'll be just as vocal for that. So I think what's more dangerous sometimes is the ones who don't say anything and don't engage at all. That, to me, is the harder audience to reach, right? So I think there's I don't know, some really, I think, key wisdom in saying let's try to meet people where they are and understand that, like, TMF is important, but it is not their main driver. It's not what their objectives are written on. It is not how their bonus is calculated. It is not, key success factor for them. So I think that's important.
Absolutely. And you hit that point really well, where, getting people to, meet where they are, so you can understand. That's very important for stakeholder involvement, right? We can't get buy-in unless we understand what exactly they're going through. So it might just be that you have to put your invisibility cloak on and go sit in on a couple of their meetings to learn what they're doing. Or maybe you have to do what would be considered like a road show, right? Go and talk to all of your functional leads to really understand what are their problems, what are they going through, and then how can we identify those people? Like you said, maybe it's the people that speak up the most, or maybe it's the people who stay too silent that we need to really be hearing from.
Yeah, Anusha, I just want to hop on to the part David said really quickly about meeting them where they are. And this is part of the reason why I went to study team meetings, because one, I already knew they were there. Two, most of our study, I don't know about many of you, some study team meetings go over, some don't. We were at a point in time where ours weren't. So I knew we had the extra time availability. And so I knew they would be there, and I knew they wouldn't be able to leave. And so in a way, I did force them a tad, David, but it was more of a like voluntarily forcing them. But then afterwards, to your point, those folks who asked me questions, who reached out, who were interested in the matter, I set up meetings with them. I continued the dialogue. And they now are TMF champions. So you just have to find those diamonds in the rough when you do bring it up in a larger group, and then focus on those people who are going to listen to you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Anusha.
Oh, no, it's fine. Thank you for sharing that. We'll move on to Ravenclaw. So tell us a little bit about the fantastic beast from your perspective, Ann.
I have to say that a Ravenclaw will never give up a chance to info dump everything that they know. So the ones that are asking questions are the ones that we're most likely going to identify as our TMF champions. And it may not necessarily be the functional leads. It may be, other people in that functional area. Really, it doesn't have to be the functional lead. If you get a conversation started with one and you get them on board, then they're going to kind of spread that out amongst their people. So that's very important. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. And from, just adding in a little bit of Hufflepuff here, I think one of the positive personality types of being Hufflepuff is the ability to bring people together, right? So you want to engage those people that do ask those questions, but also sometimes they can be sort of silent, but want to be involved and included. So maybe they're reaching out to you individually. Taking an example from my experience, I've had, different functional groups where maybe one person was responsible for uploading all the documents and for doing, QC for their department. They may not necessarily hold the, like Ann was saying, the functional lead power and responsibility, but they do a lot of the work and have a lot of knowledge, but they're not very, out there in the forefront speaking for the function as often, right? But they know their stuff because they're in the weeds, they're doing the work, they're, leveraging the information from the documents, and they get the QIs in the system, the quality issues of what document errors are happening, and they know their stuff. So those are the kind of people, when you think about a project, like say, for example, you're setting up your TMF organization and you have to come up with a TMF index and you're trying to go and look out for people. Are you going to go to the functional leads that maybe, they speak for their organization? And of course, as leadership, their involvement is important. Or are you going to go to the person that is actually doing the filing, getting the errors and, correcting after the fact, like they're correcting those errors and they're actively involved in your system. They know how to navigate it. So you're looking for those kinds of SMEs who may not necessarily be up there in the front all the time, but you need those happy personalities. They're happy with what they're doing, but they have a lot of information that may sometimes get overlooked because you're focused on getting, those stakeholders involved at the higher level, which is important too, right? Because there is the importance of success in your organization is also how involved your leadership is in terms of how committed they are to getting your TMFs inspection ready and approved. Do they know what it is? Do they know what their what the studies are representing, or, maybe they have high level metrics. Do they understand them? That's also important. And maybe you need that Hufflepuff in the room to sort of bridge the gap. Because sometimes we may fear that, like, oh, I don't know how to go approach leadership and actually explain these problems to them. Maybe you can leverage a Hufflepuff somewhere out there to sort of, present it in a very nice way. And perhaps their personality can also help bridge that gap and bring it together for, proper functioning and, to make sure it feels very real, right? You want it to feel real to them. It doesn't have to be just, numbers and graphs on a slide that mean nothing to them. You want meaning behind it. So we're now, diving into one of our last topics, which is potions. This is probably something you'll reach in your 6th year. But potions is a class, or what I like to describe here is this is how do you brew the perfect mix of compliance and efficiency using your, culture. So we have talked a lot about culture and a lot about different aspects of TMF, but bringing that all together, how is this tying into, inspection readiness? How is this tying into inspection preparation? So your culture is just as important in all of these scenarios. So I'm going to actually start this time in the order of the houses. So David, I'll let you go first. If you're thinking about potion class and you're, going in there as a Gryffindor, or just a general, head of an organization, what are some things that you're going to be thinking about to bring together that perfect mix to prepare your team for an inspection?
Yeah, and I feel like I'm going to fail my owls here, Anusha. You probably know, but there's some truth potion, right? What's the truth potion? Do you remember?
Yeah, the Vericta serum.
You knew it. But I think for me, the culture needs to have a focus, to have a positive culture, TMF culture, you need to have an element of accountability, right? So I think about this from a perspective of most of us, Teryn mentioned, they're talking about over-reliance on metrics. And what's interesting about metrics is, like, we now have a level of transparency around the TMF process that just never existed, right? And whether it's like, misleading sometimes or not, because I do think it can be, it's there, right? And it can be a positive impact if we approach that transparency with a level of camaraderie and sort of see, success as a we, not a me, right? Like and I think what happens sometimes, especially, I think there's probably some truth to this, is like the closer you get to an actual inspection, the gotcha game starts real fast, right? And people are, oh, it's not me, that's you, whatever. But I think if no matter what the standpoint of time that this happens, if you take it from a standpoint of like, hey, data management, I caught you. You didn't do your, reviews, or you didn't do whatever. What often happens is people get defensive. They might disengage or actively disrupt your progress, right? I mean, I have definitely had situations in the past where you get called into this sort of nondescript meeting with a bunch of senior people, and they're like, well, we don't want to do your TMF process, and it's like, okay, well, maybe we didn't get off on the best foot here, right? So I think this is, when you think about culture and compliance, the accountability and openness to that accountability as a team effort really needs to exist to ever really be successful at it, right?
Absolutely. And I think in all of that, sometimes we forget that, those two things don't go together because they sort of occur in silos. There's somebody always talking about culture and bringing things together, and then there's somebody in another organization maybe doing inspection prep. So that could be your quality team or your compliance team that's preparing. Really having somebody to bridge that gap is also important, right? So those two organizations need to be talking to each other. They need to come up with the same plan, because something that I've seen in my experience, and I'm sure we can all agree, when inspections are announced or the prospect of inspections are announced, everybody goes off into their own world and wants to prepare for them. And they're all doing different things. But we need to, where it comes to TMF, right? That's not something that should be thought of in the last minute. So part of your culture is sort of always thinking about it. I say this all the time. in different ways to different people, but inspection readiness is not a destination, it's a journey. So you have to keep going at it. It's not something that you do at the very end for 2 months before somebody shows up at your door for an inspection, but it's something you have to keep constant on your studies and keep constantly reminding people, because it really, like someone's saying in the chat here, it takes a village. It really takes a village. It takes everybody to be involved. So the same potions class approach, let's go over to Ravenclaw. Tell me a little bit more about that, culture importance of bringing people together when it comes to compliance and efficiency, tying together with our culture.
Well, for Ravenclaw, that tying in piece is definitely how good an SOP is written. The independent researchers are going to go to that. If it's not written well, we're not going to ask people for clarification until we've exhausted every avenue ourselves. In SOPs, it's not written with efficiency in mind, will frustrate, well, not just us in Ravenclaw, but everybody, because if it's too complicated a process, nobody's going to want to follow it. So there has to be a balance between those guardrails that will allow us to stay within compliance, but not so many steps to get people to not want to follow it. And then, it's that balance of compliance and efficiency there. So I would say make sure your SOP is written not in what I like to call a laboratory situation where everything is perfect and nobody's going to make a mistake. If it's an SOP that you end up making one little mistake and the entire thing unravels, that's going to be a major issue. So the SOPs need to definitely be concise, easy to follow, and also have a little flexibility for the learning curve of others, for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Anne. Also, same question, since this is a topic that we all want to share about. Teryn, we'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on the same culture and compliance.
So this one was kind of tough for me from a Slytherin perspective, but the one thing I kept really thinking of was if there was a potion for communication, because Slytherin is probably the worst house at communicating with the rest of the houses. So I kind of took it as a anti-Slytherin approach, but you have to have communication. You can't, and to everybody else's point, this work often occurs in silos. It's fine. The work can occur in the silo, but there needs to be a communication across those silos that the work is happening, that there's things that are being done, that things are being resolved, whatever the prep work might be. And at the end of the day, and Anusha, you mentioned this in a different kind of wording, my statement is inspection readiness isn't a destination, it's a mindset. You have to be inspection ready 24/7, 365 days a year. You can't do it if you've just submitted an NDA. You can't do it if you're in the process of submitting an NDA. It needs to be done from the beginning of your study till the day you sign your CSR. It's not something you can choose to ignore. It's not something you can just live without. If you do, have fun, enjoy. Please report in on how your inspection went. If you didn't do anything for inspection readiness, I would really like to know. But I think that the number one thing for us, at least, was the communication part, because at the end of the day, we ended up communicating. We had smaller sub-team groups. We had smaller, prep meetings. We had smaller, ad hoc calls. And then at the end of the day, we came together with the leadership, with the regulatory, with the QA, with the data management, the statistics, all of those functional people that have say and buy-in when an inspection arises. And we were ready. We were confident. We were organized, and it was helpful to be able to look back at it and say, "Oh wow, this really worked." And to have a successful no 483 or no recommendation inspection with that, we were able to take those findings and learn. And I think the number one thing was the communication. So, David, to your point, if there was a potion for truthfulness, I would like a potion for communication for the Slytherins, because they typically wouldn't communicate and would probably put the whole onus of that inspection on them, and it wouldn't go well. It wouldn't end well. They would be very stressed out and overworked. And I couldn't imagine putting the weight of an entire inspection on, say, one functional group. That just seems silly. So that's just my tidbit on that, Anusha.
Yeah.
I know
Thank
we're
you.
running.
And I think that's very true. It really comes together, as teamwork. One of the things that I would say for a Hufflepuff, the potion would be training, and if you had a potion to train and educate your functional areas. Something that I've encountered, at least in my time, a couple of times, and I've heard from people that have been through inspections, is you get into the inspection room, the inspector asks you to pull up the system and show things, and only the TMF person seems to know how to do that. And that's a recipe for a disaster. So, you want to, ahead of the game, make sure that as a TMF group, but also if there's functional areas here listening on, something that we always say to everybody is make sure you know how to navigate your system and go find your documents. Somebody else may be doing the filing, somebody else may be doing the QC, but you're the lead that's going to get asked these questions in an inspection. So, focus on training and educating your teams on how to use the key tools and resources, whether that's you building out a training program or working with your governance organization, which if you don't have one, you should have a governance organization that sets up the president for every single function to, mandate these trainings or to make them key and a core part of sort of their curriculum at their function, right? That just because they're doing functional tasks, we all understand TMF is like every breath we breathe, right? But it may not be the case for the functional areas. So what's important there is people in these functional areas need the support. And of course, if you are the trainer and the educator, making sure that your training is accessible to different learning types is key. So some people learn better from slides. Some people learn better from demo videos. Some people like seeing little blurbs on newsletters. Some people like lunch and learns or interactive one-on-one sessions where they can ask you questions. You may literally need to share your screen and show them how to do certain tasks, and that's okay. Because if you can get one person convinced that this is important and they feel comfortable approaching you, again, from a very helpful perspective, then you can get more people to go. Maybe they'll share the word and say, hey, that person on the TMF team, they helped me figure this out. Maybe they can help you too. And that's how you get more people to approach TMF as like a positive thing when we're trying to train and educate, rather than something that they're like, they see you on an elevator and they want to avoid you. You don't want that, right? So trying to get that buy-in is really going to come in from how you train and educate your team members. And that's the potion that I would want if I were taking anything away from potions class.
And Anusha, just to add on that quickly, a key thing we found helpful is office hours. Give people a place to come where they don't feel like there's the weight of a study team meeting or the pressure of their boss being there or the pressure of them looking silly or them asking a question they might think is not, an important question. Give them that space to come to the TMF team. It doesn't have to be every week. We did ours monthly, and they seem to be very well attended. And it just raises the awareness of what it is. So that's just one last thing I had that you had brought up that I thought of.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
Hey, Anusha, do
you
mind? I see a comment that I think is an important one.
Yes.
If we so I'm going to just totally summarize several sentences to say, what if we don't have TMF people, right? Because this is really common, and I know Ann and I have spent some time together working with companies in exactly this scenario. There's no TMF team, so it is literally the last thing in their minds, and I think potentially what that speaks to I think is more about, you know, having that study team mindset that like somebody's got to be looking after it, right?
Right.
That could mean that your contract with your CRO, because you're bound to have one if you're that small, is clearly articulating what the roles and responsibilities are. And it goes back to what I was saying about expectations. That's internal as well as external, right? I mean, your CRO can have detrimental impact on your readiness. It can also have a very positive impact, right? If you're clear about and you're articulating roles, responsibilities, when we want metrics, when we want, right? So I think, you know, oftentimes companies can fall into that trap of like, well, I don't have TMF people, so I'm never going to be successful. Well, I think it's just still somebody needs to raise awareness that it's got to be captured somewhere. I mean, it's regulation, right? It's not even it's not like we're doing this. Well, I know we're having fun, but like you have to do it, right? So I think it's important to get creative about how you do it. It doesn't mean you have to have some multi-step QC process at every turn, but you've got to have some sort of oversight in place.
And David, to your point about the CROs, Karuna, when I started, we were a 50-person company. I was a team of 1. I heavily relied on my CROs and what they were contracted to do. Review your contracts, review your scope of works, review your MSAs to ensure that whatever those CROs were contracted to do, they're doing, or, you know, whatever business process you've outsourced, they're doing. And it may not be a CRO, it may be somebody else you've hired to do your TMF. Whoever you've done, ensure that they're fulfilling whatever they were contracted to do, because a lot of the times they will use this as an out to be lazy, and they will use this as an out to not fulfill things for you. And so I can fully relate. But if you can highlight and say, here are the highlights of what you were contracted to do. That includes TMF management. That includes QC review and approval. That includes, you know, quarterly reviewing, whatever it is. Make sure you're highlighting those and ensuring those are happening from a management perspective. You can definitely, you know, just ensure that they're doing the work that they were intended to do. And I did see another question, and then Anusha, I'll pass it to you about just feeling that the TMF teams are not taken seriously. I think it really comes back to us as the TMF drivers, as the TMF lovers, as the TMF, you know, the TMFers who do this every day, is really pushing the passion for TMF and really pushing for the understanding that TMF is not something that we can leave out. It's not something that can be paused until the last second. And I think highlighting those, and if you have the dedication and if you have the passion for it, that ends up being osmotic towards the rest of the group. So I will stop now because I know we're running out of time, Oliver. Now that
I want to thank you guys.
I know I'm in trouble if Oliver pops back in.
Dumbledore is here, so we gotta wrap it up now. No, but I want to say thank you all so much for, you know, taking on this theme with great spirit. And I loved and appreciated everything that you guys had to say. I will add that, yes, Dumbledore is pleased. Thank you guys for having this gift feature, because I love seeing all the gifts today. And, you know, from my perspective, I think we are all wizards today, no longer muggles. If you are still a muggle, that's okay. Muggles are welcome, right? Muggles are welcome everywhere. So thank you for doing this. And I'll turn it over to Oliver.
Yeah, thank you guys. That was it exceeded expectations. I knew it was going to be fun. I got a little carried away with the gift feature halfway through. It was a lot of fun. I think everybody else did as well. This is probably the longest chat if everyone wants to read through. I think we have a time maybe for one question, because it's a question to everyone. But try and keep it as short as possible because I need a few minutes at the end. I'm going to throw it up on the screen. So the question is, for each panelist, can you share any success stories where a strong TMF culture significantly improved study outcomes? As brief as possible. If anyone wants to take that, maybe just one person can take it.
I can take for like one story that I'll share in one of my previous work experiences, something that one of our leadership team members did, and I think she's in the chat somewhere, was to do a TMF Roadshow, which was to showcase the things that our team does and to get functional buy-in. So basically, what we did was spend a lot of time individually with functional areas to understand their pain points, but also to share the tools and resources and sort of provide to them all the wonderful things that our team is giving, because there's a lot of unknown, right? There's access to information that sometimes people just don't have simply because they're not looking for it in the right places. So this was us bringing the information to them to get them involved and get them, informed about what was going on in the TMF team and all the things that they, the improvements that we were bringing about, but also ways in which they can influence the culture in their own organization. And I felt like that provided great success in that team, because even if it didn't get everybody involved, it got more voices and it got more buy-in from people to really get an understanding of what it is, what does it mean, and how can I be involved. So that's just one tidbit story that I'll share.
All right. I'm gonna cut you guys off because this session was originally 45 minutes and we pushed it to an hour because we knew we would get here, guys. We knew we would end up here. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I knew that when we put this panel together that it would be fun. And then when Anusha, you proposed the Harry Potter angle, it was always going to be a winner. Everybody seemed to really enjoy it. I think this is going to be one of the ones that people watch back the most. And thank you so much to all of our panelists, as well as the hundreds of you that attended today. And I'll see you on the next session.